Hi, I'm Amber, and welcome to the Lone Star Keto Podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, Max Mentzer. He is a private chef, and he's written a cookbook about eggs, which I can't wait to pick his mind on that one. And he also owns Keto Chef Max, where you do like cooking shows and et cetera like that, right? Like
Meal prep and
and catering. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a lot about that. I'm super excited to have Max on because he is more of a keto chef. And so let's talk about that. Welcome, Max.
Hello, everybody.
Awesome. Okay, let's get first of all some background info on you. Tell us about your professional life, and also, if you don't mind, get a little bit into your health journey. You can just be basic, and we'll expand it later. But
Yeah, so my first career actually had nothing to do with food, and I was a professional musician, and I was a drummer. I did a lot of jazz acts in the surrounding states where I live in Colorado, and then I took to heavy metal drumming, and that was kind of fun, where I expanded upon that and went and toured nationally for that with some pretty big names. Um, and after that, I was kind of finding myself getting into fitness, and it was kind of interesting. I've done all the diets. I started with, low calorie, obviously, as like a precursor to the intro stuff. And then it headed into like intermittent fasting, carb cycling. And I kind of would have issues with the low calorie, obviously, and it would deter from what I was doing. And then I was like, okay, like, why isn't this working for me? And I'd switch to another diet, try that out. And if it didn't work for me, I'd go to another one. But as far as like that kind of led me into my culinary career, where I was like, okay, I would like to find out a little bit more about the health benefits of food and what I can do with it, with being a diabetic as well. And I thought it was pretty interesting because, I like to cook growing up. My mom, bless her heart, like she didn't have the best cooking skills, but she would make like 5 meals that were like the staple dishes, right? And so I had to fend for myself a little bit. And so I went towards, at about 23 years old, going to culinary school. And I told them that I was going to change my career, and they were no part of that. And so I jumped into this head first, knowing that I was not going to be, making the money that I used to make, and would have to really compensate for those things. And I went in, I did a trade school at Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. And that was kind of interesting because, I had already taken my core classes and just about graduated with an associate's degree from a community college. And I went into that trade school, came out with a pretty good knowledge of food and the diversity of it and how to operate. And then I got my ass handed to me in a real kitchen. Culinary school, I would say, does not set you up to be the best cook in a real kitchen. And it's funny, like everybody will say that coming out of it. They're like, it's a waste of money, don't do it. And in some ways, yeah, I could see it. But if you go to like CIA, which is the Culinary Institute of America, you could set yourself up for life and become a sous chef right out of that. And that's more business professional like stuff if you want networking and all that kind of stuff. But I went from that into moving back to Colorado, and I worked at a 5-star, 5-diamond resort called the Broadmoor. And then for a year I was there, and I learned a lot about like the professionalism as a kitchen, how to operate, how to move, how to be as best as you can in the career that I was in. And that had kitchens ranging from like banquets, room service, all the way to like modern cuisine. Then coming out of that, I moved back to Austin, and I started working at a couple of nationally recognized restaurants, one of which was called Barley Swine. And I stayed there for a little under a year. And it was difficult because it's like 13-hour days, and you're working long hours, and you may not get a day off for like 6 days. And you all know that like kitchens are really tough. And so I took all the knowledge that I could from that place and then left. And then I ended up going to open a place called Red Ash here in Austin, Texas, where I helped open that restaurant, and I stayed there for about 3.5 years until COVID started up. and they canned everybody.
Oh,
Yeah.
that stinks.
I mean, it's what it is. COVID kind of ruined a lot for a lot of different service industry people.
It sure did. Okay, so how did you get into the private chef business? I want to
Yeah.
pick your mind on this one because I'm so curious.
So when I got fired from Red Ash and they let everybody go, I was like, okay, like where am I gonna get money? And that was when like unemployment wasn't a thing during COVID. And I was like trying to figure out, I was like, why don't I just start a private chef company that's focusing on keto? And I'd been doing and dabbling in keto for about 2 years at that point. And I actually was a private chef for Jason Whitrock, and then I was, kind of dabbling on my own, and I created my cookbook. But I got into that via Aubrey Marcus, where I like was messaging him back and forth, and I was like, hey man, like let me cook for you, and I'll show you kind of what I do. And it was kind of where like my career just jump started. And I cooked for Aubrey. He offered me a full ride scholarship to his Fit for Service mastermind after the dinner. And I got into that and had a blast, met a bunch of different people. And through touring through his mastermind stuff and meeting different locations, I also was kind of cooking here and there and getting paid to do it. And these were like bigger catering opportunities, but it set me up so that I could understand what to do, and I had connections for that stuff. And at the beginning of the new year, it was pretty fun, and I went and I basically jumped straight into it head first and got the LLC, and basically the credit card, like basically everything that you have to do to start a business. And it was pretty cool because I had like 4 clients, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're doing what I do at a high level and you're the sole person of this, like 4 clients for a private chef is difficult. And so I was doing that, and then it started kind of becoming apparent that I had a lot of talent and skill in this, and like really getting organized and professional about it. And I started opening up on products, and that's something that's kind of new and just now developing for that premise of stuff. But I feel like a lot of the stuff that I make for my clients, like even though it looks like meal prep, which never looks good, it can definitely be elevated just by like plating it nicer,
Of course. Okay, so you've had some celebrity clients. Can you name a few?
Yes. So I cooked for Jason Whitrock, Logan Delgado, Aubrey Marcus, Eric Leha, and I met Joe Rogan through that as well. Trying to think if I've had anybody else that was a big name. I have opportunities that are arising that could be kind of fun, that are like more notable in the culinary area that I probably shouldn't talk about just yet. But yeah, there's been some pretty big names that I've done stuff for.
Okay, how was Joe Rogan? Is he pretty cool?
Yeah, he's cool. His house is super weird. It's all Asian stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. And he wanted the keto kind of stuff? Is that when he was kind of trying to do carnivore keto?
A lot of these people that are up on this level, they're just like, dude, just do whatever you do. They don't really care. Like, there's obvious people that are like, oh, keto, yeah, we'll do some of that. I love that kind of diet, or paleo, or, carnivore. They love that stuff. And all of which, like, I can pull from a plethora of chef knowledge from my career into that kind of stuff.
That's very cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your health history. You're a type 1 diabetic. Give us some history on that.
All right. So they think that I was basically born with it. I was diagnosed when I was 1. They have a thing that's called the enterovirus, which is relatively new in the community. It's been around for a little bit, but they think what happens is the mom contracts it and it attacks the fetus, causing it to be a diabetic, is what I get off of it. But basically, obviously type 1 diabetes is like the premise is the islet cells attack, or your autoimmune disease attacks your islet cells and causes you to not produce any insulin. And I've had it for 30 years, basically my entire life. And it's caused issues, but not like drastic. You know, like a lot of people, they're like, oh, I've lost a limb by the time I've had it for 30 years. And I'm like, what? Like, how can you have diabetes and have it that bad? But people don't ever take into account that medicine for diabetics is incredibly expensive if you don't have health insurance. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to have health insurance throughout my entire life and it be beneficial for me. And it was a well provided service. But around like 18, I went onto the insulin pump and that completely changed the game for me. Before I was using syringes and I developed what's called the Popeye, and that's just basically scar tissue from the needles and the insulin being injected. And I took the pump to the extreme level and I got on the CGM and auto mode, which is from Medtronic. And that's been able to really monitor my blood sugars in the best way possible. What it is a lot of people don't understand. There's a couple different forms of insulin. There's fast acting and long acting insulin. And the fast acting is what you should have throughout the entire day if you're on the insulin pump. And the basal, which is the amount of insulin that is secreted throughout the entire day, which normal people do throughout their day, but I don't, is what keeps your blood sugar stable. And so my basal and my insulin intake was drastically reduced as soon as I got on the pump. And especially when I went on to keto. My keto diet basically took me from like beforehand when I was on intermittent fasting carb cycling, I was doing about 200 to 300 units in about 2 or 3 days. So you can say I was doing 100 units a day. I went down to 25 units a day.
Whoa.
And that's just from cutting carbs and also, you know, the insulin sensitivity is increasing as I'm going through keto. And because of that, you know, insulin's a growth hormone, and I struggled incredibly with maintaining my weight. And, you know, I would have fluctuations where I would binge and I would just gain all my weight back in like a couple weeks and then have to get it back off. And I noticed that trend come up a little bit more. And so I have to kind of watch myself with those little triggers that happen so I can avoid that stuff. But it's a lot more manageable because when I'm on carbs, a lot of the more mental aspects of health really are greatly affected rather than when I'm on a keto diet where I feel like my brain's being fueled by a better source than it is sugar, which is more of an addictive property.
Okay, I want to ask you this, and I hear this a lot, and it kind of makes me crazy. Okay, we understand that type 1 diabetics will always have to be on some form of insulin.
Yeah.
Okay, we all agree on that. That's not an issue. What the issue comes down to that I have seen is that because people have that attitude, there's nothing you can do. You're always going to be on insulin, which is true. So why should I care what I eat? Because I'll just, adjust my insulin, no big deal. So if I want to eat a piece of cake, okay, fine, no problem. I'll just up my insulin.
Yeah,
what is your attitude with that?
It is freeing to be on the pump a little bit more for your diet. And I'm not saying diet in regards of like eating a low carb diet, but like if you wanted to eat a little bit more freely, you have the opportunity to do so. However, you got to understand like the food that you eat is very important, what's fueling your body and what goes into that stuff. And I do take a lot of pride in what I do and the keto aspect of my diet and being a chef. Like I've always purchased organic and made things with like farm to table kind of foods, and that to me speaks volumes when it comes to health because you know what's in your food, and you know what's going to affect you if you have something. A lot of people don't necessarily go and look at the ingredients label to find out what's in that stuff, and there's a lot of crap. But like, if you're going to eat a piece of cake, like no matter what, you're going to have a spike in blood glucose. And then in a non-diabetic, they would immediately have their blood sugar crash because of the sugar intake and being compensated by insulin. And they're going to feel like they go hypoglycemic. And it's in a sense the same way as a diabetic, but there's a couple other things that I've noticed. And if I go to sleep on a full stomach or like I ate something before bed, I can wake up with what's called dawn phenomena. Or
Mhm.
in a sense, what happens is you wake up and the adrenaline spike actually activates your glucose dumpage and or your glycogen dump and raises your blood sugar, and you have to adjust your insulin for it. I haven't had any issues with that being on keto.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all hearing this? Y'all hearing this?
Uh, but yeah, so like timing of your meals and obviously what you eat is a huge important play and factor in all of this stuff.
So you are of the opinion that even though you can change up your insulin to fit what you're eating, it's still better for your health to fix your diet and lifestyle so you're not as reliant on as much insulin and you're not damaging your body. I've heard, and I don't know if this is, 100% true or whatever, but I've heard that there's a possibility that a type 1 can also become a type 2 where they become resistant to the insulin if they do what we were just talking about, where they keep upping insulin,
Yeah.
that eventually they might be, sensitive. And then at that point, they're kind of screwed.
Yeah. And I mean, I've actually battled with that whole scenario, and having life experience with it, I think is the best indication of how to talk about this. For me, when I was like putting weight on and I was getting heavier and fatter, right? I noticed a significant increase of insulin, but I also noticed that I would gain weight so drastically and fast with extra insulin because it's a growth hormone that it caused me issues. And what a normal person would gain when they were eating like what I was would be doubled almost. And I would say that like yeah, your insulin sensitivity is going to decrease, and so like you're going to need more to go into like the amount that you need to counteract what you're eating. Now, if you actually take the initiative and exercise, watch what you eat, go low carb and increase, if you're focused on whole grains versus like white carbs, that's better, but also, you know, just negating carbs and bringing your insulin sensitivity down is perfect for that kind of stuff. And I know like with fasting, that increases drastically.
Absolutely. And I find that really sad because diabetes is so common these days, where you used to not really hear about that many people. I remember one girl in my high school she was a type 1, and
Mhm.
that is the only person for years that I knew that was diabetic. And
Yeah.
now it's like it's just common. I was pre-diabetic. I was never full-blown diabetic, but I was pre-diabetic, right on that edge. And that was scary enough after, seeing some of the stuff that happens when you don't take care of yourself. And
Yeah.
just because you can up the insulin to take care of that piece of cake, that is not really a good, healthy thing to do. And
Yeah.
that it just kind of it scares me for those people because that is a very prominent attitude. It's
It
like they
is.
just
And
gave up, just gave up.
yeah, and I will say that like a type 1 becoming a type 2 in perception of your question, it can happen, but there's a strong indication that it won't ever. And I know Ken Berry does a pretty cool research with islet cells producing insulin still in type 1s. And it's really cool. Like he said, get this, look at this. And I did that. And obviously, because I've had it for 30 years, there's nothing. Um, but when you're newly diagnosed type 1, you still have the opportunity to reverse it in a sense like if you're really, really jump on it.
Wow, I did not know that. Wow.
But you got to know the difference between the two as well. So like type 1 is insulin dependent, like we
Mm-hmm.
rely on it to be able to survive. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
type 2, you still secrete insulin from your pancreas, your islet cells. However, there's not enough for that. So you have to compensate via pill or extra insulin. And then when you start upping your insulin more, your pancreas is like, oh, I don't need to produce this anymore. So it just shuts off.
Yeah. I've known many people because I talk to people all the time, whether it's my clients or on podcasts and et cetera, success stories. And they've been able to, a lot of them within 2 weeks, get their insulin level, their glucose levels down, and in return their insulin levels to where they've, I guess you could say, reverse. Some people have an issue with that statement, because of course if you started eating, crap again, you would be back to being a diabetic again. So of course we know that, but for the word reversed, but a lot of people can do that within 2 weeks. What does that tell you? I mean, to be able to reverse it that quick, it's like, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, for instance, when I went on the ketogenic diet, I went from I think it was like a 9.8 A1C, which is pretty high, to a 6.7. And I dropped it in the next 2 months after that to a 6.3. And
Wow.
it just continually goes down, or it stays pretty normal in that area. Um, and, when people see that, I think they don't understand the inflammatory response of carbs and sugars. And so what's happening in your body is there's a lot of inflammatory response markers, and that's upping, your insulin production and making you put on more fat. And in that kind of regards, like when you take all that stuff out and you allow your body to heal and get rid of some of that inflammation, and you're not ingesting things that aren't necessarily good for you, you're going to see a pretty drastic response in what happens with your insulin production.
Yeah, just a quick story with my dog, who recently passed, April Fools, due to diabetic complications. She We had her on insulin, as soon as she was diagnosed, we had her on insulin, and it wasn't a bad level. And for a while, we thought we put her on an all meat diet, hoping that would help get her off that crap kibble. Where we thought we were doing a good thing with the kibble we had, but it was still awful. And so we switched her to a all meat diet. And the insulin was pretty low, and we were like, okay, all right, that's not bad. And then she started having issues, and we had to start upping it and upping it and upping it. And then she went into ketoacidosis, and we had to rush her to the vet. And it took like 2 days to get it back down to even a semi okay level. We're not even talking a good level. And we were able to kind of control it a little bit. I mean, for a very short period of time. And then it went nuts again. And the insulin was no longer working. We couldn't give her enough insulin. And
Yeah.
then she went into ketoacidosis again, and we ended up having to put her down because it was just too late. And from what I understand, dogs, when they get diabetes, it's more like a human's type 1.
Yeah.
That I was thinking that I'd be able to help her reverse it like humans do, but apparently that's not really a thing. I don't know 100% about that, but it didn't work for her, and that was horrifying. So it's
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah. And understanding, like, I think DKA in humans is a pretty important area. For me, being that I've had diabetes, like I've had DKA.
mm,
And it's not fun, but I will say that insulin and water and salt levels play an important factor in all of that. Nutritional ketosis is way different to diabetic ketoacidosis. uh, I know there's minimal levels where anything above 8 is considered DKA, anything below that's considered nutritional ketosis. um, and I've been like doing this diet for so long, and the times that I've had like a 6 or a 7 minimal is like very rare. And this is like the times where like I was eating for a Thanksgiving meal and everything was fat, you know and so I ate a plethora of stuff, and it was all day long, and I was only at a 6 minimal. So it's really hard to get up into those areas, even when you are diabetic.
yeah, that's very interesting. And so many people do get that confused, and they think, oh, you're on a keto diet, you're going to get ketoacidosis. Don't be on it too long. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not how it works. It's not how any of that works. It's yeah. I just love those myths that that you see come up all the time. It's crazy. Okay, so when you've gone to your doctor, do they ask you what you're doing? Because it sounds like you're doing really well. Do they ask you, like, what diet are you following? Are they concerned? Do they care?
There's more concern than I would like to admit, and
Mm,
it baffles me a little bit because I do tell them, and then they see the results and they're like really puzzled. I wouldn't say confused. But the diets that I see that diabetics are normally on are like a low protein diet. And I understand, like, you don't want to wreck your kidneys, but you got to understand it. If you're working out, like, you need protein. And I think keto actually addresses the correct and appropriate amount that a human being needs to survive and maintain a good weight, or even like put muscle on. And you don't need a lot, like 140 grams is like my max, and I don't need anything else.
That's what I eat.
Yeah.
Almost somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm a full out carnivore. So there you go. So you are, in fact, keto, not all the way carnivore.
No, but
Okay.
I will enjoy a steak. I will say that.
Well, heck yeah, because that's some good stuff, right?
Right.
All right. You mentioned to me off video that you had some issues when you were trying out intermittent fasting and some carb cycling. Is that what I understand? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll elaborate on that. So, when I was really getting deep into my fitness in health, I found intermittent fasting carb cycling. And I will say that it was a lot of fun, and it was so helpful in like losing weight. Like, I got down to 8% body fat within a couple of weeks.
Whoa.
Yeah. Um, and I was pretty lean. I was shredded. You could see my abs. You could see my obliques. My muscles in my arms were defined. All that stuff, and like it was great. But I felt like shit. And it was because of the constant fluctuation of the amount of insulin and where my blood
Mm.
sugar was floating. And I was like, why do I look this good and feel like crap? And so I moved on from that diet after that, because I was like, uh, this is not good, And so, because I had a huge binge episode after that when I hit the 8% body fat, and I had battled with binging beforehand, and it was all because of the carbs. And it kind of, I would, in a sense, gave me like a mild bulimic episode, or like, zone that I was in, where I wasn't gonna stick there for very long, but also like it happened. Like, I would basically eat myself until I puked,
Mm.
and uh, I didn't really think it was bulimic, but then I was like talking with friends who have battled it, and they're like, yeah, that's bulimia, and I was like, oh, great, like, thanks for giving me the diagnosis.
So did you struggle with that emotionally, mentally? Was it like
Um,
something that you really
Yeah, so,
could?
straight up, like, I'm an emotional eater, and I've addressed kind of like where those issues have come from. And it's important to realize that, like, the things that bother you are the things, are like your triggers are going to do that and cause you to kind of be an emotional eater or something like that. So I go to food for comfort, right? And I think being a chef, that's pretty obvious, dead giveaway. Um, and so when I was doing that, I'd always go to like pints of ice cream, donuts,
Mm.
pizza, the things that I found that tasted good and brought me like a satisfactory level of hunger. And, even though it wouldn't be very good, I still enjoyed it. And so, like, the carbs, though, that were in those products would keep me going on eating that stuff because of the sugars in those and the addictive
Mhm.
properties of it. So, like, once I got off of that, um, it just kind of stopped. It took me a little bit of while I was on keto, like at the 6 month mark of starting, like I went and I tried a pint of ice cream again, and I did not get the same satisfaction that I did then before. And I was like, that's weird. Like, I didn't need another one. And I was like, cool. And so I kept going with it. And then, like, I just found myself getting more into salt and having that be the primary source of what I do, and having more savory foods. And like right now, like, I don't make a lot of fat bombs. And I don't eat a lot of sweet foods. But I mean, I'm known for that kind of stuff because fat kid at heart. Uh, but yeah, like when I got out of that, it blows my mind to see that kind of stuff change.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you mentioned that you kind of know where your issues come from. Was it something like a trauma from the past, or we talk a lot on my podcast about these kind of emotional things and how things from the past can actually come back and continue to plague you your whole life if you don't go back and deal with them. And a lot
Yeah.
of it manifests in food as well as alcoholism, drug use, self-medicating things.
Yeah. And, for instance, like I know I put a lot of scenarios that happened in my past off, and I just try to like block that stuff out. And it wasn't necessarily the best thing. And, going to therapy helps a lot with like
Mhm.
talking about those things openly without being judged or in those kind of contexts. But when I was in high school, I was like very depressed and down because of some things that had happened in my life with like family and friends and all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of disassociated with people.
Mm.
And I did find comfort in food when I was coming out of high school, which was great for a time being. But when I look back on that like stage of my life, I'm like, oh, like here's a trigger where if I get like emotionally stressed out via like family or girlfriend or lover or something like that, like I tend to find that that's a big play in what I do and how I eat. And so when I see that kind of stuff pop up, I'm like, okay, I see this, I meditate on it, and I try to like work through that with something else as a healthier option. Like, for instance, if I think about something negative, I try to do two positives. Or if I think about wanting to eat, I go and I read a book that will encourage me to be better about food or like learn something new about food.
I love that. And people just don't understand how incredibly important that is. And if you don't have that element, it doesn't matter what diet you do. It doesn't matter what else you do in your life. That is going to come back and bite you right square in the butt at some point. And it does affect things. And people just don't understand that. They think if they just, and even if they're not, subconsciously not even aware of it,
Yeah.
it does come back. And I talk to so many people who have had the same issue. Me included. I've actually, had my fair share of some therapy trying to deal with some of the things that caused me trauma. Even though somebody else may not have thought that was very traumatic, it was for me.
Yeah.
So, and
In a
that's true
sense,
with each person.
yeah, in a sense, in a form, like you kind of take what happened in your life out on yourself. You don't realize.
Mhm. That's for
And then
sure.
I know, recently, I will say, like, if we can bring this up on the air, if you want to cut this part out or anything, but,
Go for it.
and I think I've seen you speak about this, but I think something that kind of like broke the shell on all of that for myself was psychedelics.
Mm.
And I got into mushrooms. And being that it was a natural product, I was more attuned to using that than anything that was like produced in a lab.
Synthetic.
Yeah. And so I started dabbling in some of that stuff, and it seriously took a lot of stress out of my life. And I was like, this is really interesting. I don't necessarily like the big doses that people talk about from that kind of stuff. I think there's uses for it if you really need to work through a lot of trauma and
Mm.
revisit some things or try to work through something. Um, but I had dabbled in a little bit of microdosing, and that has proven to be really cool. When I take it, and it's every like 3 days or so, uh, it actually makes you happier. It makes you more creative, and it's like actually taking a weight off your shoulders. Like if you feel
Mm.
really heavy when you're going around, like and like you feel like you have a barbell on your back, you take it and it feels like the barbell just came off.
Mm. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Okay. Oh, yay, we still have time. Okay, let's get back into the chef part of your life. I'm curious, what kind of foods do you make? Like, do you have a twist you put on things? What makes you different as a chef, I guess is what I'm asking.
Okay, so being that I am a French culinary trained chef and I went to school
Mm.
for it, um, I think a lot of people don't know everything that's going into what restaurants have. There's a lot of talk about what's going on and everything behind the scenes, and people are now starting to become more aware. but typically the oils that are being used are kind of garbage. But you're not going to see somebody that's a chef using olive oil to saute things. So that's a nice one. No, you might see a blend where it's like olive oil and canola, but that's about it. Um, you get a lot of grapeseed oil too because it doesn't have any fragrance in it. Then, a lot of the things in dressings, obviously people know there's a lot of sugars in dressings that are hidden. I think a lot of people don't necessarily speak up about hidden carbs and things. Like one that I found that was really interesting was IHOP's omelets, where they put in the pancake batter.
Pancake, but yeah,
Yeah.
nasty. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. I'd go and I'd eat the omelet and then I'd have like a 400 level blood sugar, and I'm like, what the hell? But when you go and you navigate all this stuff, you know what's going on. And I know what's in things and I know what to negate. But also, from working in kitchens for so long, I've taken what I've learned and I've been able to apply it to every aspect in every cuisine possible. And now that we have different sweeteners that are out there, like I can apply some of those things that happened in my previous career of this stuff and to keto. So like if you want to put sweetener inside of a dressing on keto, you can. It's not really needed. But yeah, you can do that. Sauces are loaded with sugars, but with sweetener, you can either negate all that stuff or you can use a sweetener. And I think a lot of people, they look online, they see a lot of Instagrams that, there's a lot of fake pictures of food that say this is keto, or like this is how it looks when you make it, and you go to the ingredients and you're like, how did they make that with it? And you go and you try it yourself, which I've done numerous occasions, especially on some big names in the community. It looks nothing like the picture. Yeah. And I won't drop anything on people, but it's funny. Like when I do that stuff, I'm just like, really, they plastered a picture on Instagram that was something that went viral that wasn't even theirs, and they said that this is what it looks like when you make this recipe. And it's like, no, it doesn't look like that, and it doesn't taste good either. And so I think my forte in all of this stuff is like I have a lot of creativity and I'm expanding on a lot of different horizons with a lot of different cuisines. And I bring to the table the fact that, like, yeah, I know how to balance food because of my career. And so I know how to season properly. I know how to make food really tasty or presentable. And so that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. It's like, I don't think that people think they need to plate my food up the way that I do. If you can, more props to you, man. Like I will give you the best shout out of your life. But I focus primarily on the deliverance of the taste and quality. And I think a lot of people realize that, like, nowadays with all the different kinds of fats too that are associated with things, there's so many applications to using different fats in various ways. So I like to think if you're making some kind of a beef product, why would you use chicken stock? Why not use beef stock? Or if you're making galatine or something with a fruit preserve, use pectin. If you're using instead of gelatin, gelatin's going to give it that beef aroma. You don't want that in there. That's gross. Another thing that you could do is, I made this donut back in the day that was a chicken schmaltz donut. And it was just a regular old donut that you deep fried. And then you coated it with a little bit of chicken fat or schmaltz. And then you had like a jalapeno strawberry preserve, and it played off really well with it.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to lie. That caught me.
Yeah.
That sounds yummy.
And
then
so,
was this pre-keto cooking?
yeah. And I've done head to tail cuisine, just working in kitchens where I've done, some head cheese that's been so diversified and crazy and cool and like way out there kind of stuff to, plating up a pasta that I've made that's keto.
Very cool. Okay, what would you say your most popular recipe is? Like people who have tried it, what is the biggest feedback that positive feedback?
Oh man, there's probably a few.
Okay.
I have a white chocolate recipe that's out that is phenomenal. Like If there's something that, there's stuff on the market that I just think is atrocious. This one actually kind of melts in your mouth and like mimics the real melting process of chocolate. That one's pretty cool. I want to look for other avenues with it. And I was thinking about dropping like a $300 thing on getting one of those chocolate roller things that go.
Oh.
And it just basically just smooths the product out. It's really hard to make any kind of chocolate at home from like cocoa powder without that, and it'd be smooth. You're always going to have a little grit in your homemade chocolate. But that's pretty cool. I have a donut recipe that might be available. I don't know. But that one's pretty cool. It tastes just like a cake donut, but it's fried, which is delicious. I've got, let's see, all my fat bomb recipes too. Like I've had no complaints about that stuff.
Name some of the fat bomb ones.
So I've got this like brown butter pumpkin cookie dough fat bomb, where I took like my cookie dough fat bomb and I put some pumpkin puree in it, and then I took the brown bits from brown butter and I put that into a little bit of sweetener and I sprinkled that up on top. Ooh. That was a little creative and out there. White chocolate, obviously. I have this real keto fudge is what I call it. It's not really fudge. It's more of a nice melt in your mouth fat bomb that's like chocolate. But I use what's called Cocoa Rouge, and it's more of a magenta colored cocoa powder, and it tastes more fudge-like. So it's not like your typical like cocoa powder making it taste like chocolate. It actually gives that fudge flavor. I have my cookie dough fat bomb. I have one that was kind of fun that I did recently that I haven't released yet, but it was a carrot like cakesicle fat bomb. And I was able to take the white chocolate and I enrobed it in that. And it was orange, so it looked like a carrot, which was pretty cool.
That sounds pretty yummy to me. Oh, and you actually did an egg cookbook.
Yeah.
Why? Why eggs out of everything? You obviously have some kind of preference for eggs.
Yes. So back when I was working with Jason, he told me that we should make an egg book, and I was like, okay, like, what's the pretense on this? Because there's a lot of things that you can do with eggs. And so I just went and I explored like the variety of different things that you can do with them. And the book's called The Incredible Edible Egg. And really, given the fact that it's like the keto source of protein or like the powerhouse of this diet, I think it's really kind of fun to use. I think if you don't eat an egg a day on keto, you're doing it wrong. And that's like minimal. Like I probably would eat like 6 a day, but I love eggs because there's so many different applications in what you can do with it. And that book, like, I think it's cool. There's a lot of variety in it. And one of the nicer elements of that is the pancake and waffle recipe tastes like the real thing. And the creme anglaise, that's it. Not a lot of people realize what that is, but it can be used as a hot sauce, or you can freeze it and make a custard. And there's both of those recipes are in there. But I mean, it's more entry level on eggs for like people who want to be able to use it and have a better meal and have some more egg in their diet. And then I kind of want to adventure more into like the crazier things where you're making sabayons, you're making various sauces with your eggs, you're making hollandaise, you're making like sous vide is really popular at this time, and so there's like every single degree that you changes the egg. And so I've made where the white just completely falls off and the yolk is like a gel, and you can spread it like a jam almost. It's pretty
very interesting. Okay, where can you get the cookbook?
So the cookbook is on my website at ketochefmax.com. You can find the link on my Instagram as well, which is just at ketochefmax.com.
Very cool. I'll have it below, so don't worry, y'all. What is your most favorite thing to make?
Ooh. Pancakes, straight up.
Really interesting. And what do you put in your pancakes? Like, do you use like almond flour, cocoa flour, coconut flour, anything like
Oh, so
that?
this is a funny conversation. I hate almond flour keto pancakes. Hate it. It's like you have one and you feel like you need to go take a nap,
Uh-huh.
and it just kills you. And I think,
Heavy.
yes, isn't there like a lot of tryptophan in almond flour or like almonds?
I don't know. All I know is it's not good for my gut. I'll tell you
Yeah,
that.
and it will hurt your stomach too. So
Mm.
I switched. So I made a basic fat head, well, not fat head, but an almond flour pancake that's keto. But I switched out the almond flour for coconut flour, and I did that, and it creates a pretty, with what I've done with it and gotten the appropriate amounts of everything, it makes it very fluffy, almost resembles the exact same pancake that you can make at home that's normal with flour. Now,
Hmm.
you can also take that recipe that I have and make it keto or make it dairy free. And that's the really cool thing. The only problem with that one is, and it's not really a problem, it just takes longer to cook through because there's a little bit more uh, water inside of it, I think.
Hmm.
So it comes
Very
down to
interesting.
it.
Okay, I got another question. You know how, like, an auto mechanic, their personal car usually runs and looks like crap,
Yeah.
because they do that for their job, right? And
Yeah.
so when they come home, they're like, I don't care about dealing with my own car. Is that true in your case? Like, for instance, you have a girlfriend or a family get together, whatever. Does everybody expect you to cook because you're the chef? And are you kind of like, it's not my thing right now. I'm home. It's not my job. Or do you actually enjoy doing that?
It can vary. It depends on where my mind is at the moment. And I will say there's been times where I've cooked for sure for family events or family gatherings or holidays, and times that I haven't, and be like, hey, like, look, guys, I've just worked like 6 hour day, well, not like 6 days a week for the last like 2 months. I kind of don't want to cook. Or if I have like a couple of free days, I'd be like, yeah, like I can help out in the kitchen. What do you guys need? Um, I don't like when I go home, it's really funny. Like I don't take the initiative in the kitchen just because like if they saw me move the way that I do in my professional real life, they'd be scared. And I've done it, and my dad just like takes a step back. He's like, "Whoa, like you've really improved." And it's like, yeah, like this is like half pace though, and it cracks me up, but it also scares a lot of people. Like my girlfriend also did the same thing, and she's like, I don't like you when you're in the mode of Chef Max, and I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit of a different character.
So does she get intimidated? Because, okay, let's face it, when you're talking about home life, I'm not talking professional wise, it tends to be the women who that do most of the cooking. I mean, not all the times, and it's a lot different now than it used to be, but still, more often than not, it's probably the women. So does she feel intimidated if she was to cook something and afraid that you might be judging her?
I think so, and most girls that I have did it in the past are. But you gotta understand, like, I'm not Gordon Ramsay or anybody like that. If and honestly, I think it's a big flex if a girl cooks me a meal and has no fear about it. Like, props to you. Like, my girlfriend has cooked me food and all that kind of stuff, and I think that's great, and I enjoy it for sure. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of people get intimidated, but to have someone do that, like, props. Like, you got over the fear of cooking for a chef.
Yeah, I think that's cool. That's a good attitude. I like that. But yeah, I'm not sure how intimidated I would be about that. I'd probably, but I'm gonna tell you what, if you said anything negative, that would be different. But if you
Yeah.
just faked it and said, "Oh, that was good," then we're all good. Okay, let me make sure I got all of this. Okay. Oh, let's just touch again. Let's go back to the restaurant thing. What are some things that you feel customers should know when they go out to a restaurant? What should they look for? What should they ask for? What should they be aware of? You
Um,
mentioned some things, but
yeah, are you pertaining to like the keto diet?
like somebody who's trying to watch the bad ingredients, like, say seed oils and sugars, and they're
Yeah.
trying to eat more keto or even carnivore.
Okay, so first and foremost, if you have any kind of intolerances or dietary restrictions or allergies, you need to tell them about that first off. Anything that you feel like is like you don't want to be difficult or anything, it doesn't matter. Like you gotta understand is like when we're in the kitchen, we have people's lives in our hands. So if you have a severe shellfish allergy and you don't say anything and we serve you shellfish and you die, like that's on us. So,
Mm.
and also we don't want that kind of stuff to happen, obviously. So please notify everybody about whatever is going on. If you just don't want butter in your food, that's fine. Like we'll change it. We'll put oil in there. But also like if you don't want canola oil, every single restaurant will have some form of
Mhm.
olive oil on hand. And so they can swap that stuff out for you. Uh, if you have a low carb kind of diet going on, just kind of like look through the menu and see what they're offering. And like if you see a baked potato that's on like your steak, right? Be like, can I sub it out for vegetable? Because more often than not, any kind of like starch that you have, you can sub out for like healthier vegetable that would be low carb. Um, I think dressings can always go on the side if that's something that you're concerned about. But really, like when I'm in a restaurant and I do a dressing, like at this level and this leanness, like it doesn't really bother me or affect my ketones. Um, I think that, and this is something I have done in the past, is I will bring like a little bottle of olive oil with me, and I have like the little like plastic bottles that are like that big. Uh, I'll bring my own salt too if I want, but you can always ask for that stuff on the side too if you need to up the level of fat or if you want to season your food too. COVID has played a part in not having enough salt on the table ever,
Yeah.
which I've been like completely bothered by because I'm like, dude, you guys don't season your food right. But I think those are some pretty big areas. If you have any questions about something on the menu that you don't know what it is and it seems like it's a very elaborate dish, ask the chef. The chef will be able to express, like, for me personally, right? I have a severe yeast allergy, which doesn't just mean no bread or no donuts, no pizza dough, things like that. It also applies to like wine. And so I found out through trial and error that I can have wine that is cooked through. So, like, if you're braising a dish, there's wine in a braised dish. If you're making a pan sauce, there's wine in a pan sauce. And I realized that if you cook it for an extensive long period, the proteins in that actually affect me in the yeast break down
Mm.
completely, and I can have that stuff. Um, and it won't affect me like it would if I just drank a bottle of wine or something like that.
Okay, one last question before we go is, okay, like when I order a steak at a steak restaurant, I will say salt and pepper only, please no seed oils, and no love, like the restaurant I go to. It has like this butter, but it has sugar in it. So I ask for none of that. So would you say that that's an okay thing for back in the kitchen, or are they going to spit in my food?
As
Mm.
I mean, if you go down to like the chain restaurants, if you do that kind of stuff at a very busy hour and then you send it back and you ask for it again, like, all honesty, they're never going to spit in your food, but they'll be mad. But they might like throw your meat around or something, but on the
Whoops on
grill,
the floor.
yeah, yeah, it's never gonna touch the floor, hopefully. But when you get up into like nicer restaurants and stuff, I think what people don't realize is sometimes they actually put sugar on your steaks, like at lower end
Yes.
stuff, and that's just to caramelize them a little bit more, make it look a little
Yes.
bit better. But these higher end restaurants, like I worked at Red Ash, which is an Italian steakhouse. We had some of the nicest beef that I've ever seen and tasted, and all we did was salt and pepper on a wood fire grill, and that's it. We didn't put any
Mm.
oil on top of it, nothing, and so
Nice.
I don't know if a lot of people understand that. Is like, if you're putting that stuff on that, you're kind of disrespecting the product.
I agree. I totally agree, especially now as a carnivore. Don't be doing that to my steak. No, don't do it. Well, Max, it has been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And hey, while y'all are here, subscribe to my channel and go follow Max. I'll have all his information below, so don't worry. Thanks again, Max.
Thank you.
Bye.